schedule, I would like to welcome everyone to AFINet's third conference now, which will be held today and tomorrow. And we started in 2018 with a face-to-face conference in Newcastle, which was very successful. And then due to the pandemic, had to, reschedule our plans for a second face-to-face conference year by year. So we had a virtual conference last year. And for this year, we initially planned to have a face-to-face conference in Rotterdam, but we had to postpone that. But still, we are hoping that we'll be able to have this conference in June next year. I will also have a slide for that conference. But first of all, we are very pleased that to date we had 88 participants from 24 countries for this year's conference. And the background might be familiar to most of you. It's the conference of the Addiction and the Family International Network. And AFINet aims to bring together researchers, policymakers, practitioners, and experts through experience. And I think to a certain degree, this is also covered by the program, which will be coming today and tomorrow. And our main aim is to promote the well-being of family members, friends, and colleagues who are affected or concerned about problems with someone close to them due to addiction to alcohol, drugs, or gambling. And of course, we also would like to further develop research, policy, practice, and advocacy in the field. One of the features of AFINet is that we have been quite successfully offering webinars since the pandemic started. To date, they are on a monthly basis, and we decided to keep these webinars going on a bi-monthly basis starting next year. So for this year, we still have more or less monthly webinars, and all information regarding the webinars can be found on the AFINet webpage, where also materials can be found for AFINet members, mainly publications and a lot of materials on the 5-step method. And AFINet produces newsletters at least twice a year. AFINet has been founded in 2008 and has been growing steadily since then. Now we have more than 500 members from more than 40 countries. This is also one of the reasons why we decided to have the virtual conference according to UK time on one day in the afternoon and the other day in the morning, to enable as many members as possible to, at least participate on one of the 2 days. And as we already were talking about, there are some people who prefer to stay awake late in order to have both days. And for all of you who are not yet AFINet members, AFINet membership is free, and you can apply for it on our website. And here again, you see, the core issues AFINet is dealing with, and we're still hoping that we will be able to have a larger impact on policy as well, but it's also about networking among researchers, provide information, and promote family member-centered research and raise awareness on a more global, background. I'm very excited that I think we got a very interesting program for this year's conference. So today we'll have a keynote from Guillermina Natera and Marcela Tiburcio on the five-step method in rural Mexico, which will come later. And tomorrow we'll have a keynote by Jim Orford, who will, think about his long-standing experience in the field and regarding the topic where we've come to and how far we still have to go. We also have 4 symposia with 14 presenters from 12 different countries from all over the world. And by the end of the program tomorrow, we'll have one roundtable discussion. And after the program for today, we will have our annual general meeting, and we will also have elections of trustees then. And as I've already mentioned, we had to postpone our face-to-face conference already twice. And at the moment, we're aiming to have the AFINet conference on site in Rotterdam from June the 15th to 17th. And this conference will be chaired by Doreen van Namen, who has already done a great job in, pushing things forward and acquiring some funding. We will have an abstract submission form active in January and February 23, and we're aiming to send out notifications of acceptance by no later than mid of March in order to give all the participants the opportunity to, schedule their travel long enough before the conference is taking place. And on the AFINet website, you can find further information on the conference next year, which will be regularly updated. Regarding the conference today and tomorrow, of course, this would not have been possible without the support of many great people. And first of all, I would like to say a big thank you to Emmy Kaupila and Sari Jurvansu. Without these two, the whole technical issue would not be possible. They are taking care of the Microsoft Teams connection and the recordings, and they also have backup copies of the PowerPoint slides and presentations for the case that screen sharing might fail, which I think last year happened once. I would also like to say a big thank you to Jill and Richard Velleman. Without these two, I certainly would have been completely incapable of organizing anything. And I would also like to thank Sam Blakemore and Alicia Ventura, who have also provided a lot of, background infrastructure. And without these great people, today's conference would not take place, certainly. And of course, I would like to thank all the keynote speakers and also the other presenters for their contribution, which I think made up a real interesting program, which also shows the heterogeneity of the field, which is also, I think, a important issue to push forward in AFINet. And of course, I would like to thank all of you who are attending, not only for being here and for showing interest, but also for the contribution you made for the conference, since AFINet is a small-scale charity, and your support is substantial for covering ongoing costs at the AGM. Richard Velleman, as our treasurer, also will give a brief overview what the money is spent for. So this is all at the moment from my side. And so we will start first of all with a symposium which will be chaired by Richard Wellman. And no, I forgot some important technical details, so I need to share my screen once more. Oh no, this is the wrong one. A moment. Yeah, I'm not that well capable of technical issues. Well, anyway, I don't find my slides at the moment, so I'll just recall it from my memory. It would be great if during the presentations you could first of all think about if you got any questions, you could write them in the chat. There is a small icon in my on my screen. It is in the upper right where you can write in questions. And after each presentation, there will be some space for debate. And next to the chat function, there's a function called reactions. So you can see, well, a small smiley with a raised hand. So you can raise your hand and then you will have the opportunity to ask your questions. And everyone will be muted during the presentations. I hope we'll be able to do that. And yeah, and we will have to keep strictly on the time schedule since it is rather tight. And so I would like to hand over to Richard for the first symposium. And he will introduce all speakers, and the floor is yours, Richard.
Thank you, Gallus, and thank you very much for that introduction. And yes, you did remember all the things that were on the slides. So, hello, everybody. My name's Richard Velleman. I'm one of the trustees of AFINet and the treasurer of AFINet. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce our first keynote presentation. We have two presenters for this first keynote presentation, and I've known them both for many years. Ever since, in fact, I traveled to Mexico in, I think, the early 1990s, so 30 years ago, to participate on the project about affected family members that Guillermina was running and Marcella was working on, a project developed in conjunction with Jim Alford when he spent a sabbatical year there in the late 1980s. And it's been a great pleasure and privilege to work with them both and to follow their careers. And at the moment, I'm actually working with Marcella on one or two things separate to this as well. So it's very, very nice to have that connection. So these two presenters are Dr. Guillermina Natera, who is emeritus member of the National System of Researchers in Mexico and a researcher in medical sciences at the National Institute of Psychiatry in Mexico City. And from 2008 to 2018, she was also director of epidemiological and psychosocial research at the same National Institute of Psychiatry in Mexico City. And Marcela Tiburcio, who's also a member of the National System of Researchers and who's currently the head of Department of Social Sciences in Health, also at the National Institute of Psychiatry in Mexico City. So Guillermina trained in psychology and received her doctorate in anthropology, and she was part of the team which started research on addictions and mental health in Mexico in the 1970s. Her main interest has been in community research in both urban and indigenous settings. And Marcella trained in addiction psychology and is now professor of the postgraduate program in psychology at the Autonomous National University of Mexico, as well as holding the positions I've already mentioned. And she's worked in the field of substance use for more than 25 years. Indeed, if I met her 30 years ago, that must indeed be more than 25 years. And her topics of interest are family mental health in urban and indigenous populations, the development, evaluation, and implementation of brief interventions, and the use of technology for substance use care. And today, they're both going to tell us about the program of research they've undertaken in Mexico in developing the 5-step method program in rural Mexico. So I don't know how you and Marcelo, Kim and Marcelo, are going to handle this, but I pass over to you two.
Thank you so much for this introduction. And to keep within the time limits that Gallus already set, we have prepared a video with our presentation, which will help us to respect those limits.
No. Thank you very much, Richard. Hola, muy buenas tardes y muy buenos días. Agradezco mucho al doctor Bergman por invitarnos a presentar en esta reunión de Keynote. Presentaremos lo que en México hemos llevado a cabo con el programa de 5 pasos. Esta presentación la hemos dividido en 3 grandes fases, una que es los antecedentes, otra la fase 2, que es la adaptación cultural del modelo de intervención, la 3, que es ya la implementación y su evaluación, y las consideraciones finales, así como los productos que tenemos. En esta fase 1, quisiera narrarles un poco cómo entramos en contacto con este programa. Había una vez un investigador inglés que deseaba venir a América y conocer qué pasaba en los países en desarrollo, en donde la familia tiene características muy diferentes a los países de altos ingresos. Conocer de este lado qué pasaba en las familias y su relación con el consumo de sustancias era muy importante para él y fue afortunadamente. Era el fin de la década de los años 80 e inicios de los 90. El investigador de la Universidad de Exeter había desarrollado con base a la teoría del estrés y afrontamiento todo un modelo de investigación de cómo afecta a las familias el consumo de sustancias de un familiar. Obviamente estoy hablando del profesor Jim Ott. En ese tiempo yo estaba trabajando en México temas de pareja relacionados con las adicciones, en especial con alcohol, cuando recibo la visita del doctor Marcus Grant de la Organización Mundial de la Salud. Estaba enterado de los intereses de ambos y nos puso en contacto. Y así surgió un trabajo colaborativo que continuó hasta nuestros días y una gran amistad con el profesor Jim Orford y su familia, y desde luego con sus colaboradores, en especial con el doctor Richard Bellerman. Este antecedente sirve para presentarles brevemente los resultados de esa primera etapa de investigación inicial que hicimos en México. Solo les presentaré algunas semejanzas y diferencias entre los dos países, México e Inglaterra. Considero que en el caso de México no han cambiado mucho, no sé si tal vez en Inglaterra igual. Antes de este contexto que les voy a poner, quisiera nada más hacer un breve resumen de cómo se manifiesta el principal problema en México, que es el consumo excesivo de alcohol. La última encuesta nacional que se hizo en 2016 nos reporta que la prevalencia nacional es aproximadamente del 20% a nivel nacional, en relación a las mujeres es del 10%, y en relación a la prevalencia masculina es del 30%. Entonces, esta distribución es diferente para cada uno de los estados. Sin embargo, las consecuencias son muy fuertes en el país, como lo veremos más adelante. Pasemos a la primera etapa. Durante la primera investigación en zona urbana en México, debíamos contactar a 130 familias que tuvieran algún familiar con consumo de alcohol y drogas. A pesar de que el uso nocivo de alcohol, pues, como vimos anteriormente, es muy fuerte en México y problemático, fue más fácil lograr la muestra de familiares con consumo de drogas que de alcohol. ¿Por qué? Porque el consumo de drogas en este periodo era muy alarmante para las familias mexicanas. El consumo de alcohol es algo muy normalizado culturalmente. En las siguientes diapositivas veremos los datos más importantes comparando México y Inglaterra, que están publicados en varios artículos que ha escrito el doctor Orford y algunos de ellos que hemos escrito en colaboración con él. En esta diapositiva estamos viendo cómo eran las estructuras familiares, por lo menos durante el proyecto que realizamos. Como ustedes ven, las que están en la línea amarilla son todos los que viven bajo un mismo techo. O sea, son familias que tienen múltiples personas que todos quieren opinar y que todos quieren saber qué hacer. En este caso, con el joven de 15 años, y a la que entrevistamos nosotros fue a la mamá que estaba muy preocupada, a una mamá de 56 años que estaba muy preocupada por el hijo de 15. En relación a las familias inglesas, que sus familiogramas eran aproximadamente de 5 miembros, papá, mamá, en ocasiones un hijo o 2 hijos, cuando mucho 3 hijos. En este tiempo interpretamos con tendencias más colectivistas, con este modelo colectivista individualista, el comportamiento de las familias mexicanas. Como ustedes pueden ver, las familias mexicanas tienden a ser más colectivistas, actuar con sacrificio y resignación, comparten los escasos recursos, fomentan la tolerancia entre unos y otros, por lo que tienden a minimizar el conflicto y el nosotros es más importante que el yo, sobre todo para las madres. En esta diapositiva podemos observar que no se encontraron diferentes mecanismos de afrontamiento a los mecanismos naturales que se había identificado previamente el doctor Jim Morford en México y en Inglaterra. En México había más desacuerdos familiares, justamente por estos familiogramas que les enseñé anteriormente, búsqueda de ayuda más rápido para drogas, por lo que mencionábamos también anteriormente, dominaron los mecanismos de tolerancia, inacción y emocional, mientras que en Inglaterra en la independencia. No se encontraron nuevos mecanismos de afrontamiento de los 8 que había estipulado el doctor Jim Morford originalmente, y se agruparon de esta manera en la población mexicana. O sea, hay una mayor cantidad de mecanismos de afrontamientos que se refieren al involucramiento, como es el apoyo, el control, el emocional y también el asertivo. Posteriormente, siguiendo mi línea de investigación de parejas y salud mental, estudié la violencia de pareja en una comunidad indígena. Como resultado, encontré que la violencia era extrema y muy asociada al consumo de alcohol, y como una respuesta a la comunidad, se decidió adaptar el modelo urbano a esta comunidad. Antes, quisiera mencionarles en esta diapositiva que con los resultados que obtuvimos de la primera investigación con el doctor Jim Morford, hicimos un primer manual que está aquí apoyando a las familias que enfrentan problemas con el consumo de alcohol y drogas. Este primer manual describía estas 5 etapas o 5 etapas o 5 escalones que tiene el modelo, que es explorar primeramente las preocupaciones y necesidades de las familias, proveer clara información sobre alcohol y uso y sus consecuencias. Es decir, la gente a veces tiene estereotipos muy fuertes y unos estigmas muy fuertes acerca del consumo de alcohol y drogas. Bueno, en esta etapa, en este momento, se le clarificaba al familiar cuáles eran cuál es la realidad de lo que es el consumo, cómo afecta, etcétera, según fuera la problemática que estuviera planteando. También se analizaban las formas de enfrentar este problema y a partir de ventajas y desventajas, ellas podían elegir cuál es la forma de enfrentar que más les conviene, explora diferentes fuentes de apoyo y también, si es necesario, se refiere a los servicios especializados. Todos estos 5 pasos están contenidos en este manual y nosotros lo hicimos básicamente para capacitar a los orientadores. Entonces, como les mencionaba anteriormente, mi preocupación seguía siendo cómo ayudar a las familias y me fue a la zona indígena. Y en esta zona indígena, que nosotros denominamos el Valle del Mezquital, decidimos trabajar. ¿Por qué se eligió esta zona? Primero, porque estuvimos trabajando con la Asociación del Pulque. Fue un grupo que se formó por varios investigadores, el doctor Pesenovis, Medina Mora, García Andrade, Guillermina Matero, etc. Entonces, este grupo decidimos elegir esta comunidad porque es una de las comunidades que tiene más alta mortalidad por cirrosis hepática, y nuestra hipótesis es que el pulque era el que producía realmente esta sintomatología, ya que es una región de alto consumo de pulque. Sin embargo, en toda esta investigación que hicimos, se detectaron problemas y necesidades de salud mental y que también había una ausencia de tratamiento y alternativas por alcohol, por el consumo del alcohol. En esta fase encontramos también que las mujeres tenían unas principales necesidades, era la búsqueda de atención o de preocupación, porque había una preocupación muy fuerte por el consumo de alcohol en sus parejas y la violencia que se originaba realmente alrededor del consumo del alcohol. Pasaremos a la segunda fase, que la doctora Marcela Tiburcio nos va a explicar como una adaptación cultural de la intervención del modelo.
Good afternoon. I also want to thank Dr. Beleman and Dr. Bishop for the invitation to share with all of you the experience in Mexico regarding the 5-step program for family members. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Natera enormously for allowing me to be part of her team for so many years and to work in a study as relevant as this is. Her vision and leadership has borne many fruits and allowed me to train as a researcher. Thank you very much, querida maestra Guille. The second phase of the study consisted of the
since you left,
and materials that we usually apply to the urban population to carry out the intervention. To implement it among the indigenous community, it was necessary to ensure that all the resources were understandable, valid, and reliable to evaluate the outcome variables. We started by introducing ourselves into the community. The first point of contact was the health center that you can see here. And from here, we made some appointments with the women of the community. Some of them were casual and some other were scheduled. But this was like the first step we took to enter in the community. The entrance was not easy. We had to earn their trust and attending several activities. For instance, community assemblies, like you see here, where we had the opportunity to present the project and its objectives and gain their approval for us to work in the community for the next several months. When they felt comfortable with our presence in the community, they invited us to various events such as patrons and festivities, civic events, and school celebrations. Here we are looking at the last day of school for the, I think it's the kindergarten in the community. They also, as they understood what our role was, what we were doing, trying to do with them, they also asked for us to intervene with adolescents because they have a large amount of young ladies getting pregnant very early, so they asked for health promotion activities, and we carried out some of these workshops with them to talk about the risks that they were facing as youngsters. We earned their trust, and we were all ready to conduct the interviews to adapt the instruments. Remember that for many of them, Spanish is their second language and their mother tongue is Ñaño. So it was very important for us to really check on their understandability of the different instruments. The methodology we followed for cultural adaptation was the cognitive laboratory, which is widely used as a strategy to develop and validate measurement instruments. It also allows to corroborate how the target population understands instructions and questions of an instrument. It allows to deepen into the mental process to remember information and to provide an answer, among other applications that are explained here. Following this procedure, we adapted 3 instruments: the symptom rating test, the CESD to screen for depression symptoms, and the coping questionnaire. This involved applying each instrument, taking the time to rephrase each item, to inquire whether the key terms of each question was understood, and that the answer options were also understood. We had to take the time to explore what each item meant for the participants and ask how they would explain it to someone else in the community. In this example, we see item 22 of the symptom rating test, which refers to irritability. In Spanish, this word has at least 2 meanings. The most one, in Mexico at least, has to do with skin conditions and not with emotional states. Once we explained to the participants the meaning that we were looking for, we were given some options to make it more understandable. And this was like this with every item of the 3 questionnaires. Once we decided, we chose which of the recommendations was more suitable for our purposes and was understandable for them. We adapted this way the instruments to the local language, and then we performed the psychometric validation of each one of these instruments, and the results that we obtained were very similar to those observed with urban population. We applied it to a larger sample, almost 150 participants for that validation. And then the second element to validate was a series of images that we used to illustrate each of the 8 ways of coping while working with urban families in Mexico City. Remember that it was the early 90s, and there was the use of digital resources was very incipient at the time, so these were not the most incredible drawings, but they served the purpose of illustrating what each way of coping was like. We also had an adapted version of the cognitive laboratory to perform this adaptation. We read a vignette about Pedro and Rosa, a couple in the community where the man drinks heavily, and then he changes his behavior in a negative way, and he becomes very violent. And unfortunately, this is a very frequent story in the community. Subsequently, we show the images one by one and ask, what do you think is going on in this drawing? What can be the result of Rosa acting like this? Is that result good or bad for Rosa? Why? Why do you think so? And what name would you give to this drawing? In this slide to the left, you will see some of the characteristics that distinguish the inactive coping. And to the right, the descriptions that the participants gave to the image representing inaction. In addition, they made observations such as, why is she wearing pants if she's a woman? Or she should have long hair, among other suggestions that were telling us that it was important to adapt the characteristics, the appearance of each character to make them more acceptable for them. Here we have some examples of the titles that they suggested to the drawing that tries to portray inaction. For instance, the pessimistic woman who does not know how to ask for help, sad Rosa, lack of faith, worried Rosa, or the thoughtful woman. With all the information that we generated during these individual interviews with women in the community, we contacted a designer. She also made a trip to the community, and with all this information and her own observations, she made sketches of each way of coping with characters similar to the people in the community, and also the background was very well represented, I think. We showed this new version of the coping drawings to the participants, to the community, and they were able to describe each way of coping very clearly based on these drawings. But they suggested also that the images should show the negative effect of consumption on children. So we try to incorporate children in each drawing because they consider them as the main affected relatives. And these are some examples of the new version of the drawings representing each of the ways of coping. Here we have emotional, inaction, tolerance, support, independence, and here is what very interesting control. It only consisted on following the husband or the man to the consumption places and just be aware if they were all right or not. This is irration, and here we have assertiveness. So after all this process that took between 18 to 24 months, we managed to have culturally relevant materials and instruments for the implementation phase that will be explained by Dr. Natera again. Thanks a lot, and I hope it was interesting for you.
Bueno, vamos a entrar a la fase 3, que esta fue ya la implementación del modelo de intervención en esta zona indígena. Ya contábamos con los instrumentos adaptados a la comunidad y también como la forma de aproximarnos a estas mujeres. ¿Cuál fue el diseño que llevamos a cabo? Primero, los participantes fueron identificados a través de los centros de salud. Originalmente habíamos pensado que la capacitación se iba a realizar a través de personas que trabajan en los centros de salud. Sin embargo, convocamos a varios representantes, enfermeras, psicólogos y otro tipo de profesionales de la salud, los capacitamos. Sin embargo, nuestra gran sorpresa fue que cuando les dijimos que se fueran al campo para que entrevistaran a las personas y que grabaran todas las entrevistas, que nosotros seríamos quienes revisaríamos sus grabaciones, practicaríamos con ellos, supervisaríamos la acción. De repente todo el grupo dijo pues que no podía, que fueron a hablar con sus jefes, los jefes les dijeron que no tenían autorización para hacer este trabajo extra debido a que tenían una gran población que atender para problemas de salud. Entonces, tuvimos que cambiar la estrategia, ya que habíamos conseguido el dinero para evaluar el modelo en esta zona indígena y finalmente capacitamos a 2 psicólogas, una del Distrito Federal que había estado acompañando en la zona del hospital y otra que era una psicóloga que trabajaba justamente en un centro de salud y que se había terminado su contrato, una psicóloga que era de origen otomí y justamente conocía muy bien la comunidad, había estudiado en la Ciudad de México y la capacitamos y entre las 2 psicólogas atendieron a la población. Entonces, como decía, los participantes fueron identificados a través de los centros de salud. Hablamos con el director del principal centro de salud del municipio, que fue en el Cardonal, y les comentamos que que las personas que él atendiera, pues sus médicos atendieran en el centro de salud o a los centros de salud de alrededor, y que presentaban algún problema por el consumo de alcohol de su familiar, o que parte de su salud correspondía a este estrés y tensión que vivían con el familiar, no las canalizaron. Así obtuvimos 73 personas, 73 mujeres que participaron. Con estas 73 personas formamos dos grupos, uno que fue integrado por personas que aceptaron la intervención, que fueron 43, y otros sin intervención, que fueron 30. 30 de los 43, 30 completaron la intervención breve, otros disertaron en la segunda o tercera sesión. Las evaluaciones fueron llevadas a cabo, perdón, fueron llevadas a cabo antes, al inicio de la intervención, después de la intervención, y 2 meses después y 12 meses, o sea, al año después de la intervención. Las evaluaciones se hicieron con el SRT, con el CSD y con el cuestionario de COVID. Cada una de las intervenciones requirió aproximadamente de 4 a 6 sesiones. Quiero hacer mención que las 30 personas que no aceptaron participar en el programa no lo hicieron por varias razones. Entre otras, porque a lo mejor no tenían tiempo, entre otras porque les daba mucho miedo ventilar un problema familiar fuera del hogar, porque tal vez tenían miedo al hombre que fuera más violento si se enteraban de que estaban acá en el proceso de intervención. Pero lo que sí aceptaron es que las localizáramos para aplicar los instrumentos el día de la entrevista, entre 4 y 5 meses después, y al año. O sea, en este caso las fuimos a localizar a sus hogares, y ahí fue donde, con mucha discreción y demás, tratamos de aplicar los 3 instrumentos para hacer una comparación. Como ustedes ven, y les explicó la doctora Marcela Tiburcio, ella elaboró estas gráficas o estos dibujos que representan cada una de las formas de enfrentar. Entonces, fuimos poniendo uno por uno para que ellas se familiarizaran y entendieran y se identificaran con qué mecanismo de afrontamiento estaban actuando, y con qué mecanismo de afrontamiento querían realmente utilizar, ¿no? Entonces, el familiar hablaba acerca de cómo ella había enfrentado el problema, reflejaba los beneficios que había obtenido ella con esta forma de actuar, o los problemas, analizaban cómo actuar de esta manera les había afectado a ellas, encontraban y hablaban acerca de los estilos de enfrentar, y elegían la forma en que a ellos les gustaría enfrentar a sus parientes o a sus familiares, teniendo ellos el conocimiento que tendrían del usuario, y también respetando el contexto y sus propias posibilidades. Es muy importante porque las comunidades indígenas tienen estilos muy específicos de actuar. Toda la comunidad está pendiente, son comunidades muy pequeñas en donde pueden ocasionar mucho de lo que ellos llaman el chisme. Entonces tienen que ser muy discretas las mujeres que iban a las sesiones terapéuticas, y finalmente tomaban ellas su decisión. Mientras tanto, el consejero o el orientador les informaba, exploraba las varias posibilidades, tanto de las ventajas, analizando ventajas y desventajas, y los animaba a tomar decisiones cuando ellos ya planteaban lo que querían llevar a cabo. Entonces, ellos tenían conciencia que los estilos de enfrentamiento son les pueden ayudar a comprender más su propia problemática y buscar un bienestar. Los familiares, como ellos lo mencionaban, estaban viviendo continuamente con tensión, y los problemas no podían ser manejables. Por esto les ayudábamos a que estos problemas de salud físico y mental que manifestaban, pudieran ellas encontrar una mejor forma de afrontar. A continuación, vamos a presentar la efectividad de esta intervención En el primer cuadro nosotros podemos observar el grupo que recibió la intervención. En el color café podemos ver cómo ellos contestaron al CST y cómo tenían sintomatología depresiva. Posteriormente, cuando terminaron de las sesiones de grupo, eh, su sintomatología depresiva disminuyó y todavía más disminuyó después de 12 meses de haber sido aplicado la primera vez el modelo. Mientras que el grupo que recibió la intervención, como vemos, su sintomatología depresiva permaneció igual en la primera aplicación y al año. Los síntomas psicológicos son una gráfica muy semejante a los depresivos. Miren ustedes la línea café, eh, presentaban alta sintomatología depresiva y al año bajaron a 7.6 síntomas de esta naturaleza, cuya gravedad ya no era tan severa ni mucho menos. Mientras que el grupo sin intervención, su sintomatología psicológica fue igual antes entre la primera aplicación y la última, habiéndose un periodo incluso de incremento. Los síntomas físicos tuvieron un comportamiento muy semejante tanto en el grupo de intervención como en el grupo que no recibió la intervención. Esta era una evidencia importante, ¿verdad? Desde luego, de que el grupo había sido realmente este modelo de 5 pasos había dado resultados y ellas habían llegado a ciertas conclusiones que veremos más adelante. Aquí vemos cómo en principio muy someramente, desde luego encontrábamos en el contacto inicial, unas hacían referencia al problema del consumo del alcohol, otros hacían referencia a los celos, que generalmente iban acompañados con el consumo del alcohol, y otras hacían referencia a negligencia, ¿no? Por ejemplo, Rosa dice, ahora no sentimiento, Berenice, en este sentido, Berenice nos comenta que justamente ella no, Berenice está, Berenice, como Mari, como Araceli, nos están comentando que ellos tienen que cambiar, porque ellos no tienen un buen matrimonio. Eh, Mari piensa que él va a beber, pero yo no quiero que él viva a vivir con él. So we can dance with them. Otros cambios cualitativos que encontramos, las mujeres mostraron mayor firmeza hacia la persona que consume alcohol, pasaron de ser objetos a sujetos de su propio destino, pueden cambiar la historia y tienen la posibilidad de reorganizar la vida y sus relaciones humanas. Esto es muy importante en una comunidad indígena donde existen costumbres y culturales ancestrales de obediencia al hombre y de sometimiento a las disposiciones de él. Una mujer de 40 años decía, estoy más tranquila, pensé mucho, miré muchas opciones y decidí trabajar para salir adelante, ahora que soy bastante joven. Antes estaba destrozada, quería morir. Por fin me armé de valor y le dije al marido, ¿te quieres ir? Vete. Y no le hice más caso. No quiero bajar, solo irme para arriba. Él, el esposo, también cambió y aprendió una lección por mis actitudes y las de mis hijos. Si volviera a ser grosero, tendría que irse él o yo. Dice otra mujer de 40 años, antes hablaba mucho con él y ahora también, pero entendí que él decide sobre su vida y yo decido sobre la mía. Me deprimía por lo que estábamos pasando y no cuidaba a mis hijos. Siempre pensé que para eso estamos, para que estamos bien. Él tendría que dejar de beber, para que estuviéramos bien, él tendría que dejar de beber, pero me di cuenta de que puedo hacer cosas para que yo también pueda estar bien. Es una mujer de 29 años. Finalmente, obtuvimos el costo de efectividad del proyecto. Para tal fin, consideramos la depresión, que es el padecimiento más común y general del que se atiende en los centros de salud. Hoy en día se brinda un poco más el servicio psicológico, pero en ese momento las intervenciones eran más de tipo farmacológico. Y por eso solamente pudimos establecer los costos con esta medida de intervención en sintomatología depresiva. Como ustedes ven, el costo es de $31 por la intervención breve versus $107 por la intervención farmacológica. Asimismo, el costo de la revisión por unidad es de $77 versus $307 que cuesta la terapia farmacológica. Finalmente, las consideraciones que tenemos al respecto es el modelo de intervención cumple con las expectativas para el cual fue creado. Se puede aplicar entrenando a los profesionales de diferentes actividades, como pueden ser los enfermeros, los doctores, los psicólogos. Es deseable aplicarlo en el primer nivel de salud, en el primer nivel de atención, y es útil, y fue útil, lo hemos demostrado, tanto para regiones urbanas como para regiones indígenas. Es muy importante el modelo porque respeta la cultura, tomando las decisiones de acuerdo a sus recursos y creencias. Es decir, todas las mujeres consideraron lo que sí era posible dentro de su comunidad, sin que hubiera mayor riesgo para ellas. En algunas ocasiones, ellas decidieron, por ejemplo, separarse, pero cuando se decidieron separarse o divorciarse, ellas hicieron todo un plan de divorcio y de separación, porque obviamente son familias que no tienen grandes recursos y tampoco un gran acceso a licenciados o abogados que les podrían ayudar en la implementación de su divorcio. Sin embargo, algunas que ya lo habían planteado sí tenían ya contactos con estas instituciones, y lo que hizo el modelo fue de alguna manera darles el poder de llevar a cabo estas acciones más formales que implican un divorcio o una separación. Es muy importante también en este modelo de tipo indígena, porque lo que vimos es que ellas empezaron a comunicarse con otras mujeres, y esas otras mujeres les decían: la veo a usted muy bien, les decía una mujer, la veo, sus vecinos le decían: la veo usted muy bien, ¿por qué no continúa yendo con la psicóloga? Cuando yo les platicaba cómo iba avanzando en cómo enfrentar la situación hacia mi marido. Entonces, esto, si lo interpretamos de una manera antropológica, podríamos decir que estas mujeres estaban comunicando a otras mujeres que les daban las posibilidades de que si en algún momento tenían problemas, también había alternativas. De esta manera hay un contagio, entre comillas, de que se puede buscar la salud mental. Finalmente, ¿cuáles son los recursos que hemos desarrollado de este modelo? Primeramente, tenemos un manual para población urbana para capacitar de manera presencial a orientadores de la salud. Segundo, tenemos cómo ayudar a las familias a disminuir su consumo de alcohol en zonas rurales. Resultado de toda esta investigación, como les decía, también podemos con ambos modelos capacitar face-to-face, hacer entrenamientos face-to-face, y del modelo de intervención en zonas urbanas hicimos un modelo para entrenar orientadores en línea que lleva funcionando más de 10 años, y cada año capacitamos aproximadamente a 50 y 60 orientadores de diferentes países de habla hispana. Y finalmente tenemos un programa de autoayuda en línea, que se pueden consultar en la página del Instituto Nacional de Psiquiatría. Esta página está libre, no tiene ningún costo, y puede entrar cualquier persona de habla hispana. En esta también, aproximadamente en el periodo COVID, hubo un ingreso muy importante de personas que entraron a consultar problemas relacionados con el alcohol por un familiar, porque no podíamos salir, y esto se distribuyó bastante, se hizo mucha difusión para que subsanaran. Por último, pues no me queda más que agradecer a todo el equipo de trabajo, a Jasmine Mora, que fue una de las investigadoras que inició el proyecto conmigo en la época con el doctor Jim Orford, y continúa colaborando con nosotros en los programas de familia que hemos elaborado, y también, bueno, desde luego Marcela, que continúa trabajando en este proyecto. Las ligas a las que ustedes pueden entrar es sisma.mtv.mx o www.mtv.mx.
Okay,
Right, thank you very much indeed, Marcela and Guillermina. I must say, I hadn't realized that you were going to present it in Spanish, half, and I hadn't realized you were going to do it on video. So let me say that having not realized it, it actually worked very well. And the subtitles, I think, were very good indeed. So I'm opening up for questions and discussion, and we already have some in the chat. So let me start off with going down from the first one, which is a question, a research question, I suppose, which is one I had down as well. I've got a whole list of my own questions in case nobody asked anybody, but lots of people have. So the first one is about the effectiveness study you did, where you had your two groups of 43 versus 30, and yeah. Anne has asked about whether these were randomized, which I think I know the answer already is that they were not randomized, but could you comment about what that says about the effectiveness test that you've done, given that you had two groups, one of which chose to participate and one of which chose not to participate?
Lo que dice es que puede comentar acerca de que no estuvieron randomizados. ¿Qué dice sobre la efectividad, todo eso?
Okay, this is a limit of the effectiveness, but is the only manner.
It was the only way to conform those two groups, because it was very hard to get them in the study. So to have a randomized procedure would have delayed for a very long time all the project, and it was difficult because even if they were willing to answer the questionnaires and participate in the evaluation, they might have said that no, I don't want the intervention, even though they had already provided info. So it would have been a very difficult procedure.
Yes. This is one.
Sorry.
If people could try and mute while they're not talking, that would be very helpful. The music was very interesting. Please carry on, Marcela.
Okay. Yeah, sir. This is an important limitation and a challenge for the future.
Yeah. But we offer to this the control group, we offer continuous the intervention, but they don't accept it because they have a lot of problems, and they live very far from the center of health, and they have a lot of problems with the husband. And we need to in this community we need to be very discreet, and we can offer, and but we can't to be very open to offer this kind of the interventions, because the machismo is very, very strong. So the women who assisted to the intervention, they need to say some lies, mentiras.
Lies, yes.
Lies to the husband, for example. They say, oh, I am going to the treatment because the doctor told me
that I need to go each week because I'm very bad of the stomach, of the another symptoms, physical symptoms. But they had some problems, but they were very brave to finish the intervention.
Yeah. Can I come up back on that? I mean, I do understand the reality of trying to do research in very difficult circumstances. And as you say, it's obviously a limitation, but that was the best that you could do. But I'm interested in the rate of domestic violence that you saw, and your discussion here about how discreet both you had to be in doing the research and delivering the intervention, and how discreet the participants had to be in terms of not making things worse. We've had discussions in other countries about using the 5-step method, and whether people who are currently experiencing domestic violence should be excluded from any interventions because it might be too dangerous for them. And I wondered what you thought about the issue of intervening with people in a dangerous situation, if maybe your intervention might, in some cases, make things worse.
See, yes, it's a very big problem to decide, but the circumstances in this case was very good. The opportunity for them was how do you say?
It was the only chance for these women to receive help from the outside. In addition, please remember that Guillermina's main subject of interest has to do with alcohol-related violence. Yes. So it mixed those two interests, for on the one side the 5-step program, and on the other side the subject that she was interested on. And obviously it was an ethical dilemma, but we opted for providing a hand whenever possible, and not to push them to act against things that they could not change and that could raise the risk of suffering more batterings or stuff. Yes. So we had to be very, very careful, and to our knowledge, none of them were battered or received more violence because of her collaboration with us. So
right. I think, as you say, it's a very it's a big ethical dilemma, yes. And I'm sure you were very careful about it. And I suppose that might be one of the reasons why some of the 30 women who said they wouldn't take part, would that have been one of the reasons for some of the women refusing to take part?
And in this case, for also was very important that the psychologists were persons out of the town, because if the woman talk with the doctor or with psychologist that live in the town, they temen mucho.
They fear
the
information will spread.
Al chisme. Temen mucho el chisme.
Gossip.
The gossip.
Yeah.
So, and the other side, the woman who had more problem with violence and alcohol, they first talk with the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Health in the town, they help to them to talk with the man, and protect to the woman also. Mm-hmm. They have some protection about this problem. In some cases, not at all, but in some cases they had some protection of the Minister of Health, Minister of Justice.
Okay, so I have another question from Anne, also on the meeting. I'm working down, so Anne put a number of questions at the same time. I'm going to jump over one of them, and it relates, I think, to what you were saying just now about the the psychologists delivering the intervention being outsiders.
Yes.
So Anne's asked the question, did you consider training local people, peers, to deliver the intervention? Would that be feasible with these indigenous communities to train women maybe to work with other women in the community as opposed to needing external psychologists?
We
have
tried.
experience. Marcela can explain better.
Guillermina talked during the keynote, the conference, how we try to train professionals and to work directly with women and to train them as counselors. That would have taken a lot of time, because one of the main fears they have is to make public the information of their concerns within the family. So it would have been very difficult. The scenario was not ready. At the end of the process, they started to know who was attending the sessions, who was receiving the intervention, and maybe a bit of social movement was getting ready there. But we couldn't stay to presence where it went, you know. So if we wanted to get to that part, we would have stayed for longer. But we couldn't.
Well, that brings me on to another question of mine, really, which was that in much of this research was done some years ago, and I wonder what has happened since then. With the 5-step method in those communities, or with the whole issue of affected family members in indigenous communities. Have you been able to do any further work with either that community or other communities?
Not really, because we do not have funding. It takes a lot of money to go back and forward. But we know we have trained a lot of people near that community, and we know for sure that 2 or 3 nurses and psychologists live nearby, and we haven't followed up closely, but we know that they are ready to work with women who in need.
Okay, thank you. It would be very good.
Sure.
I mean, you did such a lot of work. It seemed to me that what you described about the cultural adaptation was a huge, a massive amount of work. As you said, it took you 18 to 24 months, and it's a very, very careful cultural adaptation. So it seems that it's ripe for further development, because otherwise you do all that work and you use it really for one project and maybe some training, but then it goes to waste.
Yes and no, because at that time we worked and we managed to get the intervention as part of the menu of options that the Addiction Council in Mexico was using as models to offer in the different prevention centers across the country. So we train a lot of people in the intervention in the 5-step program, both urban and rural, and we were sure that this was going to have success. However, at least in Mexico, I don't know how it is in other countries, with the change of president and the party in the power, all the programs change. So at one point, right after the research project, we had a lot of success. We trained a lot of people online.
More than 1,000.
Yes, a lot of people. We didn't show you the numbers about the number of psychiatrists and psychologists and physicians which are trained now. But after we changed president, this national program lost power, you know.
Interesting. That answer relates to two questions we have on the chat. One of them is from Lorna Templeton, who obviously has worked with us for a long time on this area, which is about how much the five-step method is used today in Mexico, and whether you have incorporated some of the work that we've done more recently about developing a competency framework and assessing whether or not people are delivering the five-step method to a competent level. So that's one half of the question. And Candice Groenwald from South Africa has also asked whether you've managed about the extent of the use of the five-step method today, and whether that's been recognized at a government level or at a national scale, and if not, what the challenges have been. So you've talked about the one challenge of being change of government, but
Right.
I'm interested in how much it's being used.
Lo que dice es que qué tanto sabemos acerca de si se está implementando o no, que si hemos hecho ese seguimiento de las personas entrenadas.
Sí, we have my local mind, no, how do you say in English? Desgraciadamente, unfortunately, we can do this research, and we don't know the fidelity that they use this manual, this manual in his own practice. But we have a very important challenge, because when we training the people, so doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., they need to change their mentality. He puts the eyes in the family, because always it's very common to put the eye, or how do you say, el ojo?
They focus.
They focus on the consumer,
Yeah.
not the family. Is our main challenge, and at the end of the training, we have a lot of testimonials, a lot of
stories.
We have a lot of stories of the people who was training, that really is a very important change the point of view and help to the family. In 5 sessions on 3 months, the training is during 3 months, and at the beginning, they follow thinking only in the consumer. At the end, they change their mind, and the focus put on the family. This is very interesting process, and we have a lot of information about this change, but we need to have money to do the research, to following the families who are interviewed.
I mean, I think if you have a lot of information on these changing attitudes amongst professionals, then that you've trained as a result of the training, that they start to understand how important it is to have a focus on the family, as well as a focus on the person who is consuming. If you could write that up, I think that would be extremely powerful and helpful. We need to draw to a halt because we have the next session coming. There are a couple of other comments in the chat, which I see that Jill's already answered Marion about English versions of the handbooks. Anne has asked about published papers. And as Lorna says, there are several publications. I've got a copy of, I think, all of the papers from Mexico. The majority are written either in English, or all of them have an English abstract, and some are written in English as well. So I have copies of all of them, and I'm happy to send them to you, Anne, or anyone else who wants. So anybody who wants, ask me. And I will send a list, Marcela and Guillermina, of the papers that I have from Mexico to you, and you can tell me if there are any more, and then I can circulate them around to people.
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm going to draw a halt now because it's 15:15, and to say thank you very, very much indeed, both Guillermina and Marcela, for a really interesting and stimulating talk covering both way of intervening with family members, but also about how necessary it is to culturally adapt the work that we do so it fits in with different populations. And thank you both very much indeed for a wonderful start to our AFINet conference. So a big round of applause for both of you. And we have